What's up, everyone? It's Bryant. Today I'm going to walk through filtering, processing data, and outputting that data into a CSV file or an email or however you like to see it, all within Power Automate. Now, your data sources are going to be from really anything. Today I'm going to do it from an Excel sheet, but these principles should help you get through any data processing you might do. There's also a couple different ways you might go about it depending on your needs, and I'll show you those as well. So let's hop in. To start, let me open up for you my sample file. Let me see, where is this thing? All right, I've got a sample Excel file. Okay, it's here, got it in Excel. It's got 5,000 rows to it. And the reason I've done this is because a lot of the ways that folks process data is through using apply to each loops. So let me see where that limitation is here in the documentation. Let's find that. Limit 5,000. Okay, so apply to each arrays can only take in 5,000 items for low and 100,000 for all others. So keep that in mind as you're running through. You may run into this 5,000 item limit. So here, in order to make sure we don't run into that, I've got only 5,000 rows. This is public data from the Seattle Police Department on, I think, calls that were made, 911 calls. So here we've got this data. This is what we're going to use. I've got this date, time, the beat, addresses, report numbers, etc., MCPP. What we'd like to do is process this data in Power Automate, filter it to be just the B3 beat. Yeah, it gives us, you see down here, 710. And then apart from that, we also want to see those where the MCPP is just Finney Ridge. Okay, this gives us a total of 11 items. And then what we're going to do is we want to output just the report number and the date time. And that's going to be the idea is perhaps every week we want to see all the reports and the date times for these particular criterias and have it come into our inbox. That way, it's all processed the way that we need it and we don't have to do that manually. So that's kind of the way we're going to go about this. All right, so first things first, this data has to be formatted as a table. All right, let me clear the data filters here. How do you format data as a table? A couple ways. You could have any cell of data selected and hit Control-T. Since this is a table, that's already done. The other way that you can do it is hit Insert, and there should be Table right here. It's grayed out. Insert Table. If you have a cell selected with data, it should outline all the data. Then you can hit OK and save it. So this is a table. Now I've got this table design tab here. The table name will be listed right here as Table 1. Okay, that's going to be of use for us when we open up our Power Automate and access the table. So let's just hop right into that. Before we do, let me make sure I've got this saved on my OneDrive. So I'm going to go to portal.office.com/OneDrive. Make sure we've got this file already uploaded there. The file has to be in a cloud location for this to work. So, yep, we've got sample data here. I uploaded it a little bit earlier. Okay, now let's head to Power Automate. Right, again, flow.microsoft.com. I'm just going to create a new flow that is an instant cloud flow. So trigger a button, and we'll call this data filtering. Okay, this could be a schedule. You could really trigger this off of anything, really. Our next step, we're going to be using our Excel sheet. So we're going to use the Excel Online Business Connector. This is where you see that most things are done through tables. It makes our life so much easier to list the data formatted as a table. For location, I'll hit this drop down. This could be saved in any SharePoint site. I've got it just in my OneDrive, and that's going to be fine for us. So I'll click OneDrive for Business, and then the document library is OneDrive. My file is located at the top level here, sample data, so it's easy for me to access there. And this drop-down has all the tables in the file in it, and we only have one table here called Table 1. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to list the rows present in the table. Now I want to show you something. I'm often, when I'm using flows, I'm using compose steps in here a lot, and I just rename these to debug, and we're going to count the rows of data that come in. Okay, so in the input, I'm going to come over to expression and type length. Okay, length is kind of our count rows expression there. And if I hit dynamic content now, it gives me these two items. Value is the list of items that we want in here. So we're going to get the length of that array. And then simple as that, I'm just going to save it and test it. And we'll see how many items are going to come in from getting this the rows from this table. Okay, 1 second, it grabbed the rows, and then it, for us, counted them. How many rows? 256. Now, wait a second. I know our sample file has 4,999 rows in it. Why would this list only 256? Well, it is a limitation of this Excel action in here. The only way to get around it is hit the three dots, hit settings, change this to a threshold of 5,000, and you can turn pagination on. Now, I have not had much success getting more than 5,000 rows, but supposedly from what I've seen online, this method here should allow you to get things over 5,000. Just haven't seen it happen. But I'm sure there's folks on the other forums who can help you get more rows than 5,000 from your Excel sheet. So let's save that. Let's just test it and see where we're at there. Okay, now it took like 3 seconds, or I can't remember how many, to get 256 rows. It's going to take us around 30 seconds to list all 5,000 or 4,999 rows from this table. It's just kind of how slow that connector is at listing out the rows on the table. We also have a ton of columns, right? It's going to grab every column in there for us, which is going to be kind of an issue. So we're at 30-ish. Okay, 31 seconds. And there we've got all the rows. So now we know that that's working correctly, which is awesome. Okay, next thing that I see a lot of folks do, and this would be one method that may work in your circumstance, is let's get a variable. Okay, our final output needs to be just those two columns. And so we're going to add in here, we're going to call this variable output array. We're going to change the type to be array. Okay. Next step for us is that we need to filter out the rows in this table that meet those criteria. Okay, so I'm going to grab a condition. This is not the best way to go about this, but I have seen this a lot. And so you may need help walking through this case. And in some very rare instances, it may make sense to do it this way. But we're going to just compare each column to see if it's got the values that we want. And then if it does, we'll add it to our output array. Okay, so first thing to check, we want that beat. And as soon as I click beat, it pops everything into the apply to each. It's exactly the way that we'd want it to be. Basically, this means for every row that's in our table, do this thing. So for every row, the condition is the beat is equal to, I believe we chose B3. So I'm just going to type B3 in here. We want to add in another condition, right? There's two conditions here. The second one was that the MCPP was equal to Finney Smith, I think is Finney Ridge. Okay, so MCPP right here is equal to, all caps, Finney Ridge. So if that is the case for this row, then we want to add those columns to our array. Simplest way to do this is to use an append to array function. Okay, this append to array variable step in here, it'll ask us for which array. The output array is the one that we selected earlier. Now here we need to do some specific formatting for what this is expecting. Okay, arrays have rows essentially within them, and each row is separated by is contained within curly brackets. So you have an open curly bracket and closed curly bracket. Then within there you have the column names done in quotes, then a colon, a space, and then the values also in quotes with a comma. Okay, so we're going to have two columns here. I'm just setting this up so that we can fill in the spaces. The first column that we wanted was that report number. So here we're just going to call it report. No need to say it's a number. We know it's going to be because we'll see it in there. So I'll type report there. And in the quotes, just grab this report number. Okay, next thing to do is the date. We're going to pull in the date at which this call occurred. So let's see, report date, I believe is what it's called. Report date time. Okay, so essentially, we've got the table. We're listing all the rows, 5,000-ish rows. We're going to pull it in here, and for each row, we're going to grab these, check these criteria. If that's true, we're going to append it to the array. Last thing for debugging, we'll throw this compose variable back out at the end, or this compose step. Again, I'm going to name it debug, and we'll do output array. We're just going to show the output array here. Okay, and actually, maybe let's do another compose step here, and we'll debug and get the length of that output array. Okay, this is just for my sake to make sure that everything is working as it does. I name it debug, and we'll just do the length of that variable. Okay, I name them debug so that when I'm all done, I can go back and delete every step that says debug because I don't need it anymore. All right, let's see what the flow checker says here. Append to array variable doesn't have a valid JSON. Let's take a look and see what I did wrong here. Okay, report date. I put an extra comma. Thank you, flow checker. All right, so without that extra comma, the flow checker says we're good. Let's test this. Now, it's gonna take, I'm telling you right off the bat, it's gonna take 22 minutes for this to run. The reason is it's going to do these one after another, and it does it 5,000 times. Okay, so divide 22 minutes by 5,000. That's what you're going to get for this apply to each. It takes a long time per step. There's one way that we can slow this down a little bit, or sorry, speed it up. We do not want to slow that down. Hit the three dots, hit settings, and we have something here called concurrency control. I turn it on, hit it up to 50. That means that 50 of these apply to eaches can be running at the same time. All right, so basically it's going to do, let's do the first 50 rows, and then as each one completes, it's going to move to another, and we'll always have 50 rows in process. Means this will move 50 times faster than it would have otherwise. Sometimes that won't work for you. Okay, in this case it will. Let me start this running, and then I'll tell you exactly why you may not want to use concurrency control. Okay, save and test, hit run flow. All right, here's why. Okay, when we're running this concurrency control, imagine this. It drops 50 in at the same time. They could finish in any order. Okay, so we have our rows in the table in a certain order, and when we hand that over to the apply to each, it's grabbing random places. Ones are finishing before others, and it will return back to you a completely changed order, right? So if order is important to you, do not use parallelism. The other thing to keep in mind is within this apply to each loop, and I can't expand it now to show you, but within the apply to each loop, we are only appending to a variable, right? So basically we have a variable out here in the cloud, and every time that one of these apply to each loops finishes, it throws something and attaches it up there. So it's just getting longer, 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 longer. Doesn't matter what order they come in, we're going to get an array at the end that has all these different items to it. However, if we were setting a variable at anywhere within this apply to each, okay? So let's say that we had a variable called test, let's say, and we've set that variable test outside of the loop to be the number 5. Now within the loop, for every row in Excel, we want to set that variable test to be whatever the report number was, let's say. Well, if we have 50 running at the same time, 50 of them are trying to set the variable to different values. And if they're also accessing that variable, you're going to have a mess and things are not going to come out at all the way that you expect them to. So if you're setting variables, never use concurrency control. Okay. Appending to variables, appending to strings, appending to arrays. If you're okay with things being out of order, use the concurrency controls. You see here, 1 minute of running, and we've got our output. Let's see how many items it is. 11. That's exactly what we'd like. And you see here, these items are all just the 2 columns. Man, that's super cool. All right, looking back, I think 11 was what we wanted. So filtering this to be Finney Ridge. And the beat to be B3. And you see down here, 11 is the magic number. So that worked out perfectly for us. And now we have this array with just those 2 columns. We could, at the very end, since I told you the scenario, let's find the OneDrive for business connector. And let's create a file out of this. Okay, we're going to create a CSV, and the file name that we want to give it is output.csv. You've got to include the file extension there. And then let's just choose, let's go back and choose the root. It'll just save it right at the top level. Now, what are the contents of this file? Turns out you can actually, there's a step for converting or creating a CSV table, and you give it an array. So it's perfect for us. We just give it our output array, converts it into a CSV table, creates that file in OneDrive. So let's save this. Oh, sorry, and then you got to add that CSV output to be the file contents. Okay, let's just save this and test it manually. It's going to create for us a CSV in the output. Okay, verifying my connections. We're good. Let's run it. All right, it's going to take us about a minute to do, so we'll come back to that. Let me start showing you perhaps a better way to go about this, okay? I'm not a fan of apply to eaches. As much as I can get away from them, I would definitely like to do so. So let's do ourselves a favor, and let's get rid of this apply to each. Okay. Now it's going to cause us some issues because we're not setting anything now to our output array. We're actually going to get rid of our output array in general. So delete the output array, initialize step, and delete the reference to it in that CSV table. What are we going to do now? We're going to add in a step to filter this. Okay, we were doing our filtering within an apply to each at the row level. Let's do it at the table level. So here, if you type filter in as an action step, there's one called filter array. The array to filter, we're going to put into it the table from the Excel action. And now it's going to ask us, well, what is the condition that you want to filter on? Okay, if we look through here, we know that we want the beat to be equal to B3. All right, but there's no way to add another action in here to the filter array. If you click the edit in advanced mode, you see that Power Automate is interpreting what you put in there as this. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it up here in the address bar just to keep it. Basically, this is a notepad, a sticky note for me right now. Then I'm going to go back to edit in basic mode, delete the beat. Let's go back. Our next one is the MCPP, and let's say is equal to Finney Ridge. Okay, now let's see what that looks like in advanced mode. Okay, copy that, throw it up here. Oops. Right next to the other one. All right, we can actually modify this to do both filters at the same time by taking this @ symbol, turning it into a comma instead. And then I'm going to wrap this in an and statement. So and open parentheses, and at the very end, I'll do a close parentheses. Okay, the syntax of this is and means it's going to do both things. If both things are true, it's going to return. It wants the first thing, a comma, and the second thing. So there we go. We got this whole thing, and it needs to start with that @ symbol. So I'll just copy that, come back in here, paste it back in, and you see now we have this and statement. Okay, so that will actually filter this whole array to match both of those conditions. All right, now it's going to give us back all the columns. Remember, we want to filter it to be just the 2 columns. So there is an action that you can do that at the table level as well. That action is called select. I'm going to show you something here. When we select, we're going to select from the filter array's body. And here's where we choose to map. Okay, this is what our new column name is going to be. So here we'll say report. We know we want a report. And I'll just click here now and do also a date. But if I click into the report, this is where I give it the column that it needs to map. You see under filter array, I don't have any columns to give it. And if I choose the columns from the Excel sheet, well, then it's not going to filter it. It's not going to filter it before it hits the select. There's an intermediary step that we need to take here. Okay, let me just run this. Let's delete the select so that we can run this. Delete the select. Create for the CSV table. Let's just give it the output of the filter array so that we can actually run this. So I'm going to run this. The inputs of workflow run debug output array. Oh, okay. We can delete this. This debug was showing our output array. This one is giving us the length of the output array. Let's just delete those two. Okay. We should be good now. Let's save and test this. Run the flow. All right, again, it's going to be 30-ish seconds. In the meantime, we come back here and see that we got our output file to create from OneDrive. This is from our previous run that we did, using that condition within the apply to each. Let's open it up and take a look. And it's exactly the way that we would hope. It's a column with the report number and a column with the date. So that's a totally feasible option if you're not concerned at all about performance, and you can wait a couple minutes for that. By all means, go for it. You know, it's not a best practice to create that flow that way with the condition inside that apply to each to compare, but it works, right? And sometimes what works is what matters. So I'm going to delete this now because we're going to start creating another output as a part of our other run. Okay, so here we go. It created a CSV table from our filtered array, and you'll notice it has every column in it. So it's filtered to be just those 11, but it's pulled in every column. Now, what's important for us is that I copy out the output of this filter array, because we need to now map all of these back to column names so that we can use them. Okay, so let's edit the flow again. After the filter array, we're going to do an action called parse. Okay, parse JSON here is the one we want. We give it the content, which is the array. So here we choose the body of the filtered array. So that's the output here. And then we give it a schema so it knows what to name the columns. I always choose generate from sample, and here's where I paste in what we just copied. Okay, and it will actually build for me what that schema needs to look like. It's really smart that way. But I'll show you something here at the end. It always adds in this required piece. The reason this matters is that if you accidentally or in future iterations have blanks in any of these rows, since it thinks they're required, your flow will fail. So I always delete this if you don't care about whether or not these have data in them. I always delete that required. It's the comma and then all the things, including the square brackets there for the required. Delete that piece. Okay, now we've got this parse JSON. Now what's cool is if we come back and now add back in that select step, and we choose, this time the from will be the parse JSON body. We can map these again. We wanted one called report and one called date. All right, and now when we look under parse JSON, it actually does have all those column names for us. That's why this parse JSON piece is really important for us, is that we can get these columns to map them. Okay, so report is going to be report number, date is going to be report date time. That's it. So that's going to select those columns for us. Then we're going to just create the CSV. Here I'll take, instead of the body there, we'll grab the output of the select. It'll still create that CSV and create the file for us. You could obviously add in a step at the end to email you with the attached file. That's totally fine as well. But for us, we're going to just create that saved CSV, create and save that CSV. Okay, so saving this flow, we'll test it manually, and we'll see how performant this piece is. Right, it's going to save in here that output file for us. Now, while this is running, there is something else that you can do to make this even faster. So if speed is something that is of concern to you, you'll see that these steps down here, virtually instant for the filtering, the parsing, the selecting, and the creating of the CSV. Virtually instant. So we're looking at the bottleneck being this action to list our rows from the Excel. We have a couple different options that we haven't explored on this. So let me just edit the flow here and take a look. Under Show Advanced Options, you have the opportunity to filter your query with an Odata filter. Okay, this is in the form of something like MCPP equals, gosh, what was the name of Finney Ridge? Finney Ridge. Okay, so that will only pull in items where the MCPP equals Finney Ridge. Now, The problem here is you can only have one statement in the Excel action. As of today, that's all that's supported. So I could not then do and do also the precinct or the beat, which is the other thing we're filtering on. So we're kind of stuck there. But this, even if I filter just by this, that will bring in a significantly less number of rows for us to process here. The other thing I can do is under select query. This is where I can choose the column names, and I'll just choose report underscore number and report underscore date time. Okay, you can choose a lot of different columns here. I don't know the upper limit of it, but that should help you to just pull in only the columns you need. Oh, actually, since we're going to filter it still, we're doing MCPP here. Let's modify this filter now to just be the beat. Okay, so if I delete this, and I can actually delete the whole thing and come back to basic mode. We'll just do the beat on this one, okay? But it'll be the output of, the output of the Excel. Beat is equal to B3, since we're going to filter the MCPP up here. But the problem with that is that we also need to include the beat in the columns that we're selecting. Otherwise, we're going to fail here when we try to access it. So let's save this now. This should give us a little bit even faster performance. Right, before I test that, I'm going to come and take a look at our previous flow. So 6 minutes ago, it ran. It took 31 seconds, 0, 0, 0, and 2 seconds, okay? This was before we selected the particular columns. So that was for a total of 33 seconds. And then we added that select columns piece. And it looked like maybe the Excel took a little bit longer than normal, but it's still roughly the same thing. Zeros all the way down. Let's take a look at the output file to see if it's the way that we would expect it to be. Same deal, right? Report and date in a significantly less amount of time. So I'll delete this now. Coming back to our flow and looking back, okay, we were running 1 minute and 30 seconds, 1 minute 42 seconds. That's now down to 39. So it's cut in half or more just by eliminating that apply to each and doing it at the table level with the filter. And also remember that if you are pulling in more than 5,000 records from that Excel sheet, you can't do that in an apply to each. You're going to need to do that using these other methods as well. All right, let's now hop back in the flow. We've got this now set up with the filtering on the Excel. Let's see how much that performs or increases performance here as well. Let's run the flow. Cross our fingers we don't have any errors show up for us. We're done in 5 seconds. That is amazing. So we've gone now from 1 minute 40 down to here 4 seconds. And if I look at that output, we can just verify that it looks the same way as we would expect, and it does indeed. So however you can filter that Excel when you pull it in using just one condition, that's really going to be your limiting factor in performance here. So we were able to go in, pull in data from an Excel sheet, process it, filter it, grab only certain columns, put those columns in a CSV, create a OneDrive file out of it. You could easily email this out, but I've showed you 2 different ways where we can do it all within apply to each. We've got some limitations there, and performance definitely is at a premium. Or we can do it outside and apply to each by using these table level filtering, processing, parsing, things that are maybe difficult for you initially, but with this help, hopefully makes a lot of sense, and can take your performance down from 1.5 minutes for 5,000 rows down to 4 seconds to produce the file that you're looking for. Pretty amazing stuff. And that's what we learned today. That's the stuff that we did. We processed an Excel file into an output file, output CSV for us, so we can use it moving forward.